Thank you very much, Ralf, for giving us an overview what the e-fuel alliance is all about and how we actually produce e-fuels. I would like you to stay here on stage for our panel discussion. The green couch is all yours. Please take a seat. And as you see, we've got some empty seats available here. So I would like to invite our next guests here for the panel discussion. Please welcome Steven Zimmer, Vice President, Automotive Aftermarket, Europe, Middle East and Asia from Gates. Warm welcome, hello. Great to have you here. Please take a seat here. And also David Loy, Vice President Aftermarket, Europe, Middle East and Asia from NGK. Hello, great to have you here.
Hello.
Please feel free to sit here. And also please welcome back Ingo Reif from Global One Automotive. Ralf already told us that Global One Automotive recently decided to support the alliance. Ingo, maybe you can give us a bit of background information about that decision.
Well, yes, thanks for that question and logic first question to us. One of the basic functions of an ITG is what I mentioned already, is political engagement and beside that supporting organizations who are doing political engagement at the advantage of all the stakeholders of the independent aftermarket, such as the distributors, the workshops, garages, and of course the spare parts producers and suppliers, which we have invited today. And logically, we are of course open and even looking for organizations who are doing this kind of lobby work and public relation, which are in favor of the independent aftermarket. So, and yeah, you mentioned if we look at the recent decision of the European Parliament to recommend the stop of car makers to sell vehicles with a combustion engine as of 2035, even though these vehicles with these combustion engines could run with CO2 neutral synthetic fuels, replacing the fossil fuels step by step in a running change. If we look at that, it goes without saying that for the independent aftermarket, that decision has also a dramatic and huge impact. And this is the reason why we are active now in this organization, and we have signed the contract today, as I said, and we are now working together and support the lobby work that you are doing.
Thank you very much, Ingo. Then the next question goes to the gentleman in the middle, to Steven and David. How does the industry or the spare parts supplier position themselves in terms of e-fuels?
You start. No, obviously this is for us a great solution for the future. We believe in all solutions to reduce the carbonization in general, and any add-on to the energy mix is welcome. We believe as well at NGK that there will be several sources of energy. That's what is meaningful to achieve the, let's say, the Green Deal targets. And it's very good that the aftermarket trade as well is getting involved together with the suppliers. Yeah? So we do support indeed this initiative.
Yeah, and yeah, to come back on that, exactly the same kind of topics. We know that it will not be a hard cut from, let's say, fossil fuels to electricity. That's not possible technically. So we know it will be a mix of energies. It will be there needs to be a bridge between technologies, and e-fuel is one of the bridges that can be used for technologies. Also to have, let's say, a step progress towards completely, let's say, electrified energy, if that would happen once.
Mm-hmm. Ralf, you mentioned it quickly because you had a lot of numbers in your presentation, and it all went really fast. So let's step a bit back. You mentioned that in the year 2035, there will be still more than 30 million vehicles with a combustion engine in operation. And here we are only talking about Germany. So how is the situation in Europe or even worldwide? It has to be a bigger number, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it depends, of course, on the uptake of electric cars. the predictions are very optimistic. So the current German government predicts 15 million battery electric cars, excluding plug-in hybrids. In brackets, right now, the majority of electric cars defined as electric cars in Germany are plug-in hybrids, actually. So they want to have 15 million electric cars on the road in Germany. And then you can extrapolate that on European level. We have 242 million cars in Europe. It's very clear that even if the most optimistic uptake will take place, we will have a majority of cars on the road in 2030 will contain a combustion engine. Now, we have actually an future electric car producer in our membership. It's Piech. They do it the other way around. They say the battery electric car is a bridge technology to a hydrogen-based technology, be it e-fuels or be it direct hydrogen. The problem is there is not this one-fits-all solution, and there is a lot of discussion going on in the industry. Of course, you have the very different issue of trucks then, which is another different issue, especially long-haul and heavy wages. So it is unclear where we will end up at the end of the day. That's why we think it is wrong to make political decisions which ban certain technologies. I'm actually in a funny situation working for the automotive industry in the past. I very often was blamed for promoting only the combustion technology. Then we had the diesel scandal and everything changed dramatically. Now I'm trying to promote an open approach. I don't fight electrification. We do not fight electrification. The opposite is true. We need electrification, but now I'm blamed that I'm, so to speak, the last fossil who promotes the old-fashioned combustion engine technology. So it's a very difficult discussion. We are not there yet when it comes to the picture of e-fuels in the wider public and also with public decision makers, political decision makers. But that's how we have to work now for the next years, because clearly we will fail any climate goal in Europe in the transport sector at least until 2030 without e-fuels.
You mentioned one really interesting thing, that we don't have one solution that fits all. And I think this is a really important point. And you mentioned electromobility. So I have to ask you, and this is also maybe a question all of you can answer. If we're talking about e-fuels, does that mean the expansion of electromobility is somehow not going to go as well, or is it something that can coexist? You said it depends on who I'm asking. I would like to get the opinion from all of you here at our panel discussion. Maybe you continue, Stephen. What's your opinion on e-fuels with electromobility?
I don't think it will slow down electrification, but it is bringing a new dimension in the discussion. And I think there's a kind of dogma today when you look into the news that electrification is the only way, and indeed there's a mix-up already in the general public between hybrid and full electric already. People mix up both. And indeed, I think that trying to go very fast is important for the environment. At the same time, we have to be realistic what the industry can cope with, because we can guess what's going to happen with some companies that will have to take decisions on their industrial footprints now that it's officially, let's say, an aged or dated technology, if the law is going to be applied. Some will have to get rid of their manufacturing facilities. They will have to relocate production, and that will have some social impact as well. So I think that's why it's important to have a couple of possibilities in between and to move to carbon or neutral, or let's say better climate solution, but with step by step and not in one hard cut.
Mm-hmm. David, can you agree on that?
I fully agree, yeah. And here I think we're talking about passenger cars, but if you look at the overall emission in the world, I think you mentioned in your presentation, Ralph, about marine and aviation. I don't know any sustainable way to make electric vehicle in those fields right now. So e-fuel can be a good solution to transition towards something in the future, like hydrogen or fuel cells. Yeah.
Ingo?
Yeah, I fully agree, and I just practically look at what is possible. Of course, without any doubt, we need both because of that really ambitious targets, and I think there is not even time to fight out one technology against the other. We simply need both. In the northern European countries, we might be able to cover the mobility with electrification, and that even might be partially possible here in Germany as well. But if I just look practically in the real life, I don't see the charging points. I see cities where you have individual houses, they might be able to have the charging points, but how about these big houses where hundreds of people live? Where do they charge their cars in the future? And if we take the e-fuels into consideration, and replace in a running change the fossil fuels. For me, I have no fantasy and idea how this really in practice can work. And if we look more abroad in the south of Europe, where it is not politically even the mindset there, that there is a focus on electrification and widen this out to the global situation, for me is very hard the decision to understand and to say dogmatic. There is one solution for a big problem, so we need clearly both.
And I think that's also a good point. All of you mentioned that we have a huge problem concerning the infrastructure with electromobility still even today. And we started talking about electrification like years ago, and look at where we are now. And in terms of e-fuels, you also had a slide about that. When do you think realistically it could be available for me to go to a gas station and get e-fuels?
That depends on the regulation, actually. Sorry to say that, but I think I had a very interesting meeting with a member of the European Commission, and he said, I don't know why you are fighting so hard for e-fuels in road transport. They are coming anyway, because they are needed everywhere. This is not true, simply because the costs and to reach scale effects, investors invest billions into a industrialized production, so could be, for example, the oil industry. They need the security that in the next at least 15 years, the products they are producing there will be actually also sold in a market. And this is not the case without any regulation. We wouldn't have any electric car on the road right now without the CO2 regulation. I'm very sure about that. So to answer your question, if we do it right, and we have quotas in the Renewable Energy Directive for aviation and maritime, and if we would find a solution for the car sector as well, the road transport, then I'm very sure that in 2030, everybody of us could fuel at least blended fuels at the fuel station. There will be also a solution with 100%. Porsche, for example, is investing into this plant in Chile because they want to offer their 911 customers a climate-neutral solution. That will be 100%. ExxonMobil is doing the distribution, so from 2024 on, you will see on certain fuel stations 911 fuel stations, so to speak, where those customers can buy this stuff. So that is, of course, more expensive then, and the customers who have these cars can afford it maybe also, but that is how to start. And maybe one last point, which is very important and which is completely not understood, or at least I have the feeling in the public debate. We have two different philosophies. So green politicians usually say, well, we do not have enough renewable energy, so we do not have enough of those materials or fuels or hydrogen, so we need to decide where to use it from the start. Our philosophy is that we say, with this approach, you never will get enough production in place. We need all possible angles we can use to ramp up production. And here comes the road transport. I mean, the CO2 abatement costs in the car sector are above 500 euros per ton CO2. So it's the most expensive abatement costs we have in any sector. Nobody in the airline industry could pay this kind of abatement costs. They would get bankrupted right away. So we would be stupid, actually, economically, if we would not use this leverage we have to use the ramp up. And even if we then in 2050 drive around all with electric cars, that's fine. But we have used the meantime, so to speak, to ramp up the production for e-fuels. That would be also better for planes, because kerosene then at the end gets cheaper also for the airline industry if we do it that way.
So hearing all of that, I would like to address a question to you, Stephen. How do you think is the outlook on the future with e-fuels? Are you positive that, like you said, in about 10 years, 20 years, you can go to a gas station?
Tough for me to have an answer on that. I'm not a specialist on that topic. But I think already having a blend would be a good idea, because it would help to reduce the impact of existing vehicles on the road, and not just wait 2035 as that date is confirmed, and then again 15 years, because there will be still carpet on the roads until then. So I think that having a kind of let's say e-fuel plus other solutions that are existing already, so some biofuels and so forth, should be part of the solution, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And David, if you would have one wish, what would it be in terms of future possibilities? If we're talking about e-fuels, electromobility, about everything that needs or helps us meet the goals of the climate change?
I think I would say openness in the discussions, to go away from dogma. I think you've mentioned that as well in your presentation, where we're looking only at part of the issue, but not the overall footprint of each of the solutions. So I think openness, and then looking really at what makes sense economically, so that we can speed up actually and make things viable right now and not later.
Mm-hmm. And Ingo, from your perspective, Global One recently supported the e-fuel alliance. How optimistic are you that this is going in a direction that is speeding up things, maybe?
If I would not be 100% optimistic, we would not sitting here, everybody together, and we are absolutely convinced that this is part of the solution to contribute also from our side, from the car driver side, to reduce the CO2 targets that we have.
I think that is also a good perspective. Even if you are saying you're not an expert on the topic, all of us, I just assume that are car drivers, right? So everybody goes to the gas station and has to think about, okay, about the price. You mentioned, of course, right now we would have a higher price, but it's all part of the game, how the development is going. And it's still a pretty interesting topic. You not only mentioned the car industry, but also you mentioned trucks and you mentioned airplanes. Right now, politicians see the e-fuels as a substitute for kerosene in the air traffic. But why don't you think that is just not enough, only to talk about air traffic?
Because, well, it's a much smaller amount. If you include road transport, of course, the demand would be much bigger. But as I said, it's about the abatement costs. I mean, look what is happening right now with the kerosene prices, how difficult it is for the airlines in this international competition they are. That is, by the way, a huge problem, especially for European airlines, because right now they are facing a two-way change. Kerosene will be included into the energy taxation, which of course raises the price for kerosene, and there will be most likely a quota also for e-kerosene until 2030, which makes it more expensive for them. So the problem is you don't need to fly from Berlin via Frankfurt to Singapore. You can do that also via Istanbul. Istanbul is not part of the European Union. They don't need to have the same taxation, or you can use Dubai as well, so there are other areas. That's the big problem they are facing. So the demand will be much lower at the end of the day if you include only airlines. That's the simple reason. Same goes, by the way, for shipping. It's very clear we need, because there is no other solution. We will not fly with battery planes in the near future. So they need liquid fuels. But the question is, how fast can we ramp up as cheap as possible to keep mobility in general affordable? I think that's the major question.
Yeah. And to put it in a word, when I understand this correctly, is if we only would go for e-kerosene instead of using the e-fuels for the individual mobility, it would cannibalize both industries, actually, because flying gets more expensive and still driving is getting difficult.
And speaking about prices, you said as cheap as possible. For you personally, as car drivers, if you knew that with e-fuels you would meet the climate goals, how much would you pay? Because right now, if I'm going to a gas station here in Germany, we had these regulations, and wow, I don't know how it is with you, but it was so cheap. No, it wasn't actually. So if we think about that, and if I can think, oh yeah, that's good to meet the climate goals, how much would you be able to pay, or would you be willing to pay? That's a more personal question to all of you.
Well, we are used to have the prices that we have now, and of course, I think if you ask 100 people of us, you would get the same answer. Of course, we don't want to pay more, even if we are knowing that also driving will be more expensive in the future. And actually, that is maybe not a question to us. That's a question that can be asked to people with a low salary. To people who would like still to have the individual mobility, but don't have the money to buy an, at the moment, still expensive electric car. So for me, it's worth it to raise the question into that direction. I personally, I don't mind if I pay 5 cents more or less a liter. But if we look to part of the publication, it's really a valid question.
So before I'm closing this panel discussion, I would like to give you, David, and also you, Stephen, an opportunity to add something. If you have got any thoughts on that topic, please feel free.
Yeah, maybe on the aftermarket, I think we talk a lot about electrification, and it's a big concern for the market in general, the consumers as well. They don't know even which car to buy anymore because they're afraid that in 2 years they're going to use it where they're living. Yeah. So, but I think we should also, in the aftermarket, look at where we are heading in the coming decade. And I think that in the coming 10 years, there is no much disruption on the aftermarket business per se, and probably even some upsides if the OES channels and the car makers are not able to invest anymore in that channel because they're focused on electrification. Maybe that will give us, in the aftermarket, now very centric looking, some nice 10 coming years to go.
Yes, thank you. David?
Yeah, I think the amount of vehicles right now on the streets in the world was mentioned to be 1.4 billion VIO right now. And this is exactly the prediction we have for 2035 as well. So there might be a small ramp up and going down later, but that means in 2035 the way we operate right now will be the same, right? Because the market addressable will be the same, probably with a higher, let's say, value due to the hybridization, which is bringing higher value of components on the vehicle. So indeed, I don't see any particular issue for the aftermarket for the next 10 to 15 years.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us here today for this fruitful discussion. It was really, really interesting, and I think it's still going to be very interesting in the upcoming years, and we will see how it's going and when we will actually be able to go to a gas station and fill it up with e-fuels.